I think we can start our panel today. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with I'm not that tall. We're going to start off with an introduction of our folks. They're going to tell us a little bit about what they do, and I'm really honored to have an amazing panel that agreed to hang out with me for an hour here today. Then we're going to go through some quick market statistics, and then we're going to go into some discussions, and we open it up. If you have any questions, ask us, and we'll take that in as part of the talks today. So again, welcome and thanks for coming. And we'll just start it off with who we are. I'm Steve Wong. I'm the moderator of this panel. Again, thank you for coming out. And we'll start off with Spencer.
Okay, stop.
I should read your official title, though. Spencer Stevens.
My mic working. All right. I'm the CTO of Sony Pictures. I have a group of a small number of technologists that work on pretty much everything that's done in the studio that involves technology other than the IT infrastructure. And that starts out on the set, television and motion pictures, how we shoot the stuff, the cameras we select, how the images work with the lenses, follows all the way through post-production into mastering. It's mastering for a theatrical release and for the various forms of home entertainment and television release. And then from there on, it's a question of standards, content protection, and then the due diligence on our deals. I think it's very important that Studio has, of course I do, a very strong technology department because clearly so much of what we do is dependent on technology, but also more importantly, the new business models, the way we're dealing with stuff is enabled by the technology we use.
And I think it's really important that Spencer's here now. Thank you. Because in Spencer, we have a studio, a content creator. We have a distributor, because Sony also distributes content, and they also have an OTT platform. So Spencer has seen the pain of the entire process all the way through, so I appreciate that. Andy Beach, it's been a long time since we've hung out, but thanks for coming down.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Hi. My name's Andy Beach. I'm a technical evangelist at Microsoft. For the past 4 or 5 years, I've worked on Xbox and am now, was actually part of the Xbox One application launch team, and also now work on all of our devices and platforms, so helping expand media applications out across all the various platforms. The role I typically play, I describe myself as a application midwife. I sit between the developers and the platform and help each work the kinks out as they're trying to bring the app out into the world and to fruition.
And I think that's an interesting thing, because I think when people think of OTT, they immediately think of mobile devices, and that's it. But the Xbox and game platforms are such an important part of the consumption of media, where someone could be playing a game and they get involved with that and they want to know more, and the latest numbers are in terms of percentage. 75% of it is passive media viewing. 25% of it is actual video gameplay. Wow. We'll get into a lot of that as we go on. And Christophe.
Christophe Louvion. I'm the former CEO at Amgo. It's a movie streaming service distributing movies from all the major studios and TV shows. At the moment, I'm consulting for several companies in the OTT space, both startups distributing content, but also some large established companies trying to figure out their OTT strategy.
And you may know of Amgo as being one of the DreamWorks companies. They spun off for DreamWorks to be into OTT space. So again, we're very fortunate of having an amazing group of folks here. And Fabian.
Yeah, I'm Fabian Birkfeld. I'm the director founder of W12 Studios. We are a digital design agency based in London. We focus very much on creating user experiences for media and technology. So we work with a range of different clients in the space, ranging from telcos like Verizon or Vodafone, or Telecom Italia or Northern Portugal, consumer electronics companies like Samsung, or content providers emerging like Red Bull or established like the BBC. So we kind of creating or crafting next generation TV experience across different platforms and screen sizes and markets. So yeah, glad to be here.
Well, thanks for coming. Came all the way from London for this conference, so
all
thanks
the way
so
from
much.
London, yeah.
Or are your arms tired? I told you. And Tom Adams.
Tom Adams Research, longtime tracker of developments in technology and media, and way back to when it was analog.
Very good. Good to have a research guy here to keep us honest on the facts.
do my
It's
best.
still analog on both ends.
They're still what?
It's still analog on both ends.
Yeah, that's
Your
true.
eyes, the lens.
Yeah, that's true. But the middle got very digital.
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
it?
And Steve Bradbury.
I traveled a long distance from Marina del Rey, California to be here today. I am the president and soon-to-be former COO of the Zoom Media Group. The company, I'm very proud of what we've done. The company produces and distributes short-form, timely, topical news and information videos. It was founded by 3 broadcast journalists who have 32 Emmys between them. We produce under a variety of different brands. We do about 50 to 50 million views a month of our own content, and we also do have a whole side of the business that does white label content for companies like Yahoo and Tribune and Hearst and other companies like that.
Very cool. So let's run through some quick research from the market just to give you a sense of where we are today and why this is really a compelling time period in media. So when we take a look at OTT, according to Parks and Associates, out of all the markets, North America is really the one leading the way for over-the-top. The revenue, people ask, is it subscription? Is it transaction where people buy and download? Again, the trends off the 2019, according to Parks and Associates, is more subscription than transactional. Something that's really interesting that happened this year is it's the first time that internet advertising will overtake television advertising revenue. Now, when that changes, they used to call this digital dimes. That's an entire game changer for this industry and over-the-top television. So when you look for the future, if you're a branding company, when I was a kid, I used to work in an advertising agency, and we were concerned about adopting a brand. So when you look at that's the youngsters, I guess you can say, children. When you see 75% of up to 8-year-olds have access to some sort of mobile device. The average 8-year-old spends 8 hours a day with different media. And children born after 2005 consumed 35 hours per television per week. If you can get the kids, the young adults, onto your brand, your app, then you'll have them for life. It's sort of like, our parents grew up watching television and they had appointment viewing. Well, as we know, the new generation is different. They want it now. They want to see the content they want now. So we're in a different world. So we'll go into a few discussion points with our audience. So in 2016, who wins and why? Traditional television, mobile video, DVR, or internet video? And any of us can answer. So 2016, who's going to win this year? Don't be shy, guys. Come on.
Well, it's a brilliant question. I think traditional TV would win in many ways. Although I like to say it's being obviously undermined, disrupted. But traditional TV, I would say wins for 2 reasons. Firstly, I think the basic experience that traditional TV provides is still one of the best experiences out there. It's continuous, it's linear, it's lean back.
It's free.
It has most of the audience ball eyes, and there's a lot to be learned from. However, I think it only wins in a certain aspect of things. So I think it only wins in certain contexts. It wins in the living room, it wins in the family context, and it wins with the older audiences. I think if you look at new forms of content, short-form content, emerging platforms, emerging content providers, obviously they're entering the market through the other channels, but I think they're all still aiming to get onto the big screen and still finding a place within the traditional ecosystem. So I think across the board, whether you look at the more established emerging TV players like Vice or Red Bull or other ones, they're trying to get into the traditional TV ecosystem. If you look at some of the new sort of short form players or the kind of rising stars in the multi-channel networks, they're also sort of aiming towards the traditional TV. So I think it's for the traditional TV to lose how it's going to move forward. My starter for 10.
In 2016, there were all probably somewhat winners and somewhat losers. I know that sounds like a wishy-washy answer, but traditional TV has not gone away. The demise has been exaggerated, so it's not going anywhere. Mobile video is certainly on the upswing, but monetization is still a challenge. Time-shifted video, well, people are doing that all the time. They've been doing that for the last 30 years, so they're still doing it. And internet video, which I don't know if you want to separate that from mobile video, is something that we're all used to doing. The question I would ask is, are you talking about consumption of individual episodes, or you're talking about binge watching? Binge watching puts an entire spin on that whole question. If you're wanting to watch the full season, the latest season of, Orange is the New Black, or whatever it is you want to watch, you're limited to where you can watch it. You only really have one option, and that changes that equation. If that's your goal, then time-shifted video Netflix is, going to be your win. If you're still liking to watch The Good Wife every, Sunday night, and you like the appointment of watching it, or like watching it on Monday because you watch it see once a week, then it's a different equation. So it really depends on under what context you want to ask the question.
I kind of think it's funny we don't even know where, like what nights the shows we watch are on anymore. Like, I have no notion of the channel something is on or the time that it's actually on. I just know it's either on my DVR or it's on Hulu or it's on Netflix, and I can find it. So
I was just thinking that. I was saying, that show, God, I don't know what time. I know I can search for it, and I can find it.
But here's why I would disagree. If you are engaged in something, a sporting event or certain types of shows, and you want to be engaged in the discussion is happening in real time, or especially if it's a sporting event. Sunday football is happening in real time. By Monday morning, the discussion is Monday morning quarterback. So it still does matter if you want to engage with an audience outside of your defined universe, which would be, you, your family, your friends. But if you want to go beyond that, you still need to be watching in some semblance of real time. So it's not, I don't disagree with what you're saying, but it's not that black and white.
The numbers about the trend lines crossing for internet advertising and TV advertising. Another point towards traditional TV continuing to win. That includes everything, and the lion's share of that internet ad spending is search, which has nothing to do with this industry. So the actual video advertising on the web is a couple of $2 billion versus the 70 for TV. So fairly insignificant. The ad load issue, all of the issues that have held back video advertising on the web. So, as far as the battle for ad dollars, it kind of looks like the internet's winning in 2016, but in reality, TV still, owns it.
Because it really comes down to like a cost per point, right? If you're used to a cost per point for television buys, and you have a huge volume of an audience, and a cost per point on an advertising point is a whole different animal, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, advertisers are certainly looking at, especially mobile, but because that's where the kids are going. But boy, is the nut yet to be cracked on how they're ever going to generate anywhere near the kind of money that TV advertising generates at this point, which has to, be solved.
As Andy can tell us, the information that I can pull if someone opted in is almost like a lead generation, where I can say, yes, this person watched this ad, and I can tell where he is, and I can direct him to go to this store and buy it, or he can buy it right now. Wouldn't that be a higher cost per point for that type of programming?
That's the theory, and it works with static advertising on mobile devices and over-the-top devices and everywhere else. It's again, it's just that for some people are twitchy-fingered when they're online as opposed to when they're watching TV, and therefore getting them to watch ads is a challenge.
Isn't that just a question where we've actually put the ad in the content? I mean, whether you do a pre-roll or whether you do it actually interstitial?
Sure, but I mean, really all people are kind of willing and barely willing to tolerate is a pre-roll. Interstitials are a challenge, and in fact, the common practice is just whatever the ratios are. I forget off the top of my head, but it's a quarter of the ad load or less.
There's always an interesting question about subscription versus advertising support, and it's always interesting to ask. I'll just by curiosity in the audience, if you have a choice between watching a piece of content, show, whatever it is, with ad support, or would you pay a couple of dollars to see it with no commercials? How many would prefer to see it free with advertising? How many people would prefer to pay the couple dollars and see no ads?
Wow, that's interesting.
I think it depends on the content. I'd be willing to pay for an episode of Game of Thrones, but other shows I watch where I'm not really paying full attention to it, I would want to do the advertising model.
About the time shifting, DVRing it and going fast through the ads.
And some of the boxes you can skip and some you can't, depending on what box you're on at any given time.
So another question came up in our earlier panel. How many folks, just out of curiosity, how many folks in the audience want to own something? Digitally download it and keep it somewhere, a movie or something else, versus paying something a month and seeing for free?
Music, are we talking music or just TV?
Music or movies, say.
Both.
Interesting. All right, cool.
That's 1%.
Yeah. But I'm old.
Hey, there you go. All right, so what's better, one ecosystem or many apps? It seems like in the old days, we had 3 networks, or we had a few cable companies that would aggregate all this stuff, and they bundled together, programming, so they would curate it for us. But now we can download a bunch of apps, and there's some 100-something apps you can watch content on. What do you guys think is better, one ecosystem or multiple app systems?
I think you got to really define what your terms are. I mean, the ecosystem, right? I mean, do you mean an aggregated program guide, an aggregated search? I mean, what does cable bring you that a single app doesn't? Well, the biggest thing it brings you is, first of all, the program guide, which allows you to browse through it. Then it gives you an aggregated search across all the channels. So if you've got a single ecosystem, at what level is that a single ecosystem? Because a cable operator by itself is a bunch of individual channels stacked on top of a particular transport. And I think that, to some extent, that goes back to the previous question, because in fact, if we look at it, traditional television as a label, traditionally that means something that's tied to somebody that owns a piece of spectrum. But that's a transport, right? And if you step back from the transport and say, well, actually what I want to do is get video from me to you, right? And I look at what the options are with that. Then I look at, well, what's my relationship as a broadcaster with you as a viewer? And you separate that out from the transport, right? Then you start wondering, well, will television survive or not? Well, television over a piece of spectrum may have a limited life, depending on how rapidly a bandwidth goes up and the ubiquity of IP connections, but that doesn't change the nature of ourselves as a content creator and as a channel, right? We still got to build a relationship with the consumer. We might be doing it over a different transport, and I think the same thing's true here. As you move away from the traditional, perhaps the traditional bundle model, right? Do you move to individual apps? Do you even move to some sort of meta app that is capable of doing search across multiple providers, which you actually even see now, I think on Roku does that. So I would be very reluctant to constrain this in the terms that we've known historically, right, which is individual channels versus the bundle on a cable system, and start really looking at how does the changes in their technology change what the offering could be, rather than what the offering's been in the past, which has always been constrained by the technology you have available. And I think that's always an important step, is when technology changes and you're doing one thing, think, well, how much of that am I doing simply because the technology constrained me to do that, and which of those constraints have now gone away? So I think the answer is all of the above, for that reason. It's a great answer. It's difficult to argue with that one.
Absolutely.
So the answer is a great answer, and is from the perspective of the app developer or the platform provider. But what about the producer and the celebrity? Is it good to have one ecosystem or many apps? Because the celebrity is the one who's bringing the audience in the new model. And so how do you constrain, or how do you open up the audience, or does the audience want to go to many apps to get to the celebrity portion of the program? Because app clutter
Yeah, I mean, I'm not quite sure that I think there's an arguable difference between the two, other than the wrapping. I mean, you know, if my app is lost amongst 1,000 others, does that really matter to me more than if my channel is lost amongst 500 others? You know, I think we're all having to learn to filter stuff, and we'll filter apps, and gaining market share has never been easy. And you know, there is so much noise out there, and I mean that in the engineering sense of the word noise, that it's becoming very difficult to differentiate yourself. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, but like one difference is like on TV, like you have competition on the same medium. Like you take the grid and people hate it, but at the end it works. It's very easy. The cognitive overhead to switch from one app to another is very cumbersome very quickly. Look, on any device can take any of your favorite. Like it's very, very difficult, and that's a big challenge. The flip side is like when you have one ecosystem, so you take either the Apple or the Google or whatnot ecosystem, it's very good for a consumer perspective, but if you fast forward that story, you have a big problem from a creative perspective where all content gets distributed only to one distributor. We know that story. That's a scary one too, right? So both sides actually have, either for the consumer or for the producer of content, are very difficult when you fast forward them to the extreme.
I think that less is always more, and I, as a designer, would of course say that. But I think the biggest risk that is in the digital space, whether it's e-commerce or whether it's music, is fragmentation. So if you can do it with one ecosystem and reduce essentially the burden of choice, I think you would do anybody a favor. I think what's important though, if you articulate the ecosystem, is that you have a strong brand, a strong way to message it to the consumer, so you can simplify the brand experience and consolidate it in one ecosystem. So I think that facilitates the discovery process, whether it's through an EPG or through other mechanisms. I think it allows you to build your brand and essentially create, whether it's for a celebrity or whether it's for a larger brand, whether it's a broadcaster, whether it's a content provider. And it also helps you with your product development. One of the biggest things that we experienced when I was at the BBC is we started off with 1,400 different domains, and that's unwieldy, unmanageable, inefficient, and a nightmare for the end user. So to essentially evolve it into a consolidated ecosystem that makes sense, both internally as well as externally, as well as makes sense for the brand. I think you need to have a lot of things in place to really effectively do that. Global experience languages, the right content taxonomy, the right experience language, so you can actually roll out applications. But I think if you do it right, it's a win-win for the organization and for the user.
There are, I think, two key considerations, one of which has been touched on by several panelists, which is ease of use. If it gets too complicated, then it gets ridiculous. Jonathan Hurd is out in the room from Altman Valandry, and he shared with me some of his TV Everywhere research that they just released, and in the context of TV Everywhere and cable companies and TV Everywhere, his research asked if people wanted a single app from your cable TV provider or wanted a separate app for each channel. And across the board, it was the lowest was 79% for a single app, and the highest was like 88%. So pretty much everybody, at least in that ecosystem, wanted a single app, not multiple apps. But there's one other consideration that hasn't been mentioned, and that is who owns the relationship. If you go back to the 70s when the cable operators, and I'm sorry that I'm old enough to remember this, but those are mere child, tiny child. Actually, I was. The cable operators took over the direct relationship with the consumer from local television. Local television historically always had a direct relationship with the consumer. I grew up in New York, and there was ABC, CBS, NBC, and what now is Fox, and the independents, and each station had a direct relationship with the consumer. The cable operators came along and said, we'll aggregate all those relationships and we'll be the billing operator, we'll be the relationship with the consumer. So they took that away from the stations. Now jump to where we are today, and who wants to have that relationship? Well, the distributor wants to have that relationship, whether it's the cable operator or DirecTV or whoever it is who's providing the content. The content owner, the producer, wants to have that relationship because they want to build a social media environment for their content. The talent would like to have their relationship. Talent wants to have direct relationship with the fan. So there's an interesting battle going on now when you talk about, is it one unified element that you use to access all your content, or do you have, you know, the HBO app, the CBS app, all the other apps? Who's going to control the relationship with you? And how many relationships do you want to have with your content? And I don't think that's an answered question yet. I don't think it's going to be answered for some time, but it's going to be a lot of jockeying back and forth. And I think eventually the control will come even further to the consumer. You'll choose who you want to have a relationship with, and that will define the winners and the losers. I don't know if anybody else thinks so. I don't think it's clear today.
No, I agree with you that I think we're far from being done fragmenting. Like we're in the middle of that now. And the thing that and we've all sort of said it, but what it comes back to is the platforms that win will be the ones that make the discoverability easy and service it beyond the apps themselves. And then the 88% of people who want one app, it doesn't matter because it's as if the platform becomes the single app for them, and it just is fed by multiple things under the hood. And that becomes less of a concern. So I think we're just in this painful, awkward period of transition where we're looking for that right way, and everybody's trying it, and Microsoft's trying it, Apple's trying it. You know, everybody's got their own take on it, and everybody's going to continue to have a take, and we'll see where the evolution gets us as we work through the process. But it's the discoverability. To me, that's the next. If I was starting a business right now, it would be figuring out how to deliver everybody on whatever platform they want, all the things they want, whether it's a celebrity, a piece of content, or a given channel.
Isn't that what TV Everywhere is, in theory, trying to accomplish?
No, it's trying to deliver the content.
I'm not supporting them, by the way. I'm not saying they're their answer, but that's
No, I think of that as something very different. To me, the discoverability has nothing to do with the delivery and the operation of the content. It's very much defined as how I, as an individual, go find the content I want on whatever device I want, regardless of where that is. And that to me it can be an independent function that becomes a layer above all this content. It's the filter between the user and the pipe.
I think you make an interesting point about the relationship and finding them. And I think it comes into the production of television shows and movies. Because if you're producing a show, technology allows you to do a number of things now, of course. The people on the show, the writers of the show, the actors can reach out directly to an audience, and they can pull a demand out. I think there's a few folks that are trying to get on cable and they couldn't get on cable, so they got to show up on the internet and they get a few million followers, and then they get a cable deal. So we have that ability to technology, but then you've got to look at the picture. Is it a B2B model or is it a B2C model? Because it's two different animals. It's a lot easier, writing a show, producing a show, and selling it to Sony or someone else, and they give you a big check and you're off. Now it's a little bit more difficult because if I'm writing a show, producing a show, now I need a bunch of different relationships. I don't necessarily have one person to sell it to or one company because there's so many different options there. Maybe I get 7 cents every time it goes on Hulu, not that that's the rate, and 100,000 from a broadcaster here and something else. So that relationship of a B2B that used to be where I would sell to a studio, now we move into this relationship where, me as a creative or a piece of content or an actor wants to get known directly, and maybe I sell it directly. That whole model maybe is changing that relationship. So,
But I mean, I agree with what you're saying, but I don't think it's necessarily a zero-sum game. Right. So I mean, I think if all of these things can exist at once, then you start looking at actually how do you distinguish yourself? How do I, as an actor, distinguish myself from you? That doesn't mean that I need to also distinguish myself from the studio that produces the TV show I'm in.
Well, yes, it's not a zero-sum game. The actor is a brand. The show is a brand.
Right.
All the actors in a show are the brand.
Right.
Each individual brands. Then there's the show, and they bring with them what their brand has been over a career. Then there's the show that's the brand. We can debate whether the network is actually a brand anymore or not. The distribution platform is a brand. The for attention, and ultimately who's going to own the relationship. And the relationship is both the eyeball, but it's also the revenue. At the end of the day, I'm on the content side, but I come from a revenue point of view. If the revenue's not there, the rest of it's academic.
I think it comes to searches. What do you guys find people are searching? Are they searching program titles? Are they searching actors' names? Are they searching genres? Are they searching, what are they searching first?
All the above. All the above. That's why I think, you know, the distinction between transport being different than the person with the credit card is a good one. And I think that idea that maybe we are absolutely in the middle of the fragmentation, and it's, you know, been going on since there was 3 networks, of course. And remember the internet with AOL versus Yahoo at the time, actually Google ultimately. But, you know, or do we want it curated and in one place where we go to that place and they've got the credit card so they win? Or do people want an open internet where it's just a madhouse and you surf?
You may not be able to trust it, right? You can have your movie there, but do I trust giving that to my credit card, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Or do I trust the download to not infect me? Is probably the more frequent question people face. But so I think, you know, we're absolutely in the middle of fragmentation. But I think, you know, that suggests to me that the way the tide will turn at some point, because people are going to get really tired of not being able to find what they want. And so maybe, you know, there's many ways that aggregation could come back to the business. And I kind of like that idea that you presented, that it may not be in the traditional form of a central place that everybody goes to get their stuff. It's a search function that lays on top of everything, and, you know, it's kind of there in Fan TV, and some other little, you know, places that it's starting to happen. But, you know, if you've used those, you know the frustration. Yeah, you found it, great. Now where is it? Well, it's showing Tuesday night on A&E, or you can go buy it from iTunes. You know, oh no, Netflix doesn't have it. You know, so, you know, I'm not sure if search can really substitute for, you know, everything being located on a server where you can get at it really easily. But that may be all we can accomplish, given how fragmented things are getting.
But there's an interesting question in what you're saying, I think what you said as well. Is search the way people, I mean, let me ask, does everybody here search or browse to find content? How many people search? And
Question, where do you search? Where's the first place you guys search for content? Anyone?
Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime.
Anyone else?
I'll go to Google and just type it in and see what shows up. What are my options?
And then that would link you to a provider like Netflix, is that?
There's 3 or 4 different options that pop up in a Google search, and then I'm like, I can watch this for free right now. Again, Bill Maher, you know, do I go to HBO or I just click and find out what's free? Again, you can watch almost all of Bill Maher eventually for free.
There's likely also space for bringing back humans outside of algorithm for curation, like building audiences on specific topics, communities that's like, you know, I've heard somebody doing sports or anything that is very specific where the curation will always beat any algorithm. Smaller communities. And if you look at the financials, actually, it is possible if you have a very dedicated audience that actually comes on a regular basis, even if they pay you $5 to $10 a month, 10,000, 20,000, it's a small business, but you can tailor to this type of audience and scaling multiple smaller audiences. I think we're going to see a lot of those curation. In addition to recommendation engines and search that are more algorithmic driven, I believe the communities can really be created, and you'll see some of those being created already today.
So the other half of my question goes to what you're talking about, curation, right? How many people here browse for content rather than search for it? It's interesting. That's a very low number.
For example, like a site like a Crunchyroll is very curated because it's anime, right? And they have a lot of users, right? New product like Pluto TV makes sense of the trillions or whatever it is of videos of a YouTube by creating linear channels in a step back function. And yes, they recreate channels, but like you could put cats and you see 2 hours of cats, right? And attract an audience that want this type of content. You see a lot of the new product that mix.
Not the conventional linear experiences. I think in general, whether it's browser or search, I think the general idea of sort of a poll model where the user goes out there and sort of selects something is no matter how efficient, how great it's designed, will always be slightly tedious. And I think the beauty about TV, it's linear, it's non-stop, it's lean back. So I think why people like binge TV watching in one series, because it's easy. It's like, okay, I've watched one episode, and I'm going to watch the next one, and the next one, and the next one. I think there's obviously a model, I think, where that can scale up across sort of a larger content catalog, and I think that will be a combination of smart algorithm people and also a different kind of user interface, which is not this sort of dichotomy between a static user interface, whether it's a search box or whether it's a wall of tiles and pretty much immersive content. There are obviously better ways of doing it. So I think that's maybe where the future would take us. Hopefully.
You know, curation is an interesting animal, since that word came up a couple of times just now. Think about it. If YouTube curates content for you. Once you've logged in, they give you recommendations for yourself. A lot of places curate content, they give you suggestions. Who's to say those are really what you want? You know, Pandora, you can get 1 million different music channels. So it's almost unlimited curation, as opposed to an algorithm that none of us understand. Does anybody here understand the YouTube algorithm? Anybody can explain it to us? No.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so curation is an interesting animal because, yes, it makes our life easier because somebody's helping us, guiding us, but I'm not necessarily sure it's always a good thing. Sometimes it points you in really kind of strange directions. You go, huh, really?
And it also makes it really difficult for serendipity to play a role in that.
Right. Which is why when that gentleman said that he goes to Google and he types in something and he sees what comes up, there's at least some semblance of serendipity there. Again,
Yeah.
Anybody want to explain the Google algorithm? Anybody? No? Okay.
You mean the search algorithm or
The
the
search,
general Google?
well, the search algorithm. Yeah. So, you know, it's curation is a double-edged sword.
I think the key is that you always provide different pivots of discovery that coexist, and you don't predictate the choice. You know, it's search, it's featured, it's curated. I think you know the key is that you find a way to kind of, it's not one or the other, but essentially create a user interface, a product model where you have these different pivots of discovery coexistence. So it becomes because you can never quite predict whether the user wants to search or whether they like this or whether they don't like it. I mean, it's quite open-ended, and I think the big risk is if you sort of embrace one model and think, yeah, that's the solution. Like the EPG worked for a long time, but a lot of people hate it. It's a question.
Yeah, I think the other thing is that there's a third aspect to it, which you know, cable satellite television in the traditional sense of it really has, which is you turn it on, there's something on.
Yeah.
Right, and I think that, you know, and even just flicking the channel perhaps has got more serendipity in it than opening up the channel guide. If you look what one of our properties, which is an over-the-top ad-supported channel called Crackle, has done on the Roku, it's really interesting because they've taken that live TV model and put it together with curation and even search. So when you connect, when you bring up the app on the Roku box, you actually go into something that's in progress, it's already streaming, very much like what you see on TV. And if that works for you, then great. It's just like tuning in something on TV. And then they've got a really strong curation, which doesn't just say major genres, but actually starts going down into what I could best describe as themes. You know, a theme of driving fast, for example. And they'll start giving you options like that, and then they also will go to obviously search. But the thing I like about it, and I still like about television, is that if I go to one of the straight on-demand providers, whether it be Netflix or Amazon, and I stare at a bunch of stuff, most of which has been recommended or you know, some very broad theme, for me it's a bit like, you know, when I'm hungry and I go into the kitchen and I open the door of the refrigerator and I stand there for 15 minutes trying to figure out what to eat. And I do the same thing with these services. Why I was asking that question is I tend to flick sideways and I go across each line. and don't quite find something I want to watch, and by the time I actually decide on something to watch, I'm sitting there for 10 minutes not doing anything. So, I mean, I think there is part of the TV model that actually really has value, at least in some circumstances for some people.
15 minutes in front of the refrigerator?
Yeah, you never
Wow.
know.
That's impressive.
Thank you.
Any question?
Yeah, I have
I'm sorry, can I just interrupt and say, yeah, but the fish curry is like the live TV channel. I apologize for interrupting.
Fish curry is delicious. Going back to curation, networks do spend a lot of time and money on curating their content, and what happens to that when it is thrown into these, into like the world of Netflix, into the world of Hulu, where we don't know which network this is coming from, which night of the week, and is there an effort being made towards creating like a curated experience for viewers? I know Showtime, now you can go on Hulu and pay extra and have Showtime access to some Showtime shows, and is that the next step, or as far as consolidating, you know, ecosystems, will there be one place to go and then have curated experiences based on networks?
Well, the CBS app will give you a curated experience of CBS content, just like HBO will do for HBO content. So
Yep.
you'll get a vertical of that
But
brand.
as far as consolidating all of those ecosystems, you know, like not going to 10 different apps.
But that's dependent on the platform itself. So if we think of each of those as applications, it's dependent on the Apple TV or the Xbox or the iPhone to have that curation point. And Xbox is certainly, you know, in the Xbox One, they've worked on making that discoverability and curation by having areas that are directly part of, you know, when you log in, there's content that immediately becomes available, and it tends to be whatever's trending or whatever's newly started, and if it's something that's exclusive somewhere, it might be branded as Showtime, like, you know, The Affair started, there'll be basically sort of a poster for that. But if it's something like Inside Out, which debuted and was available in multiple places, you'd get pulled into a place where now you get to decide, oh, you've already got these 3 apps installed where you can buy or rent it, or you've got these other 4 options that are available. And that's the responsibility of the platform that's helping make those curation choices in that instance.
I think there's a lot of pent-up hope that Apple will ultimately be a solution provider to what you're talking about, but Apple's got the same challenges working with and I won't speak for the gentleman from Apple, he can speak for himself, but you know, Apple's got some of the same challenges that everybody else who's trying to aggregate content has. How to, you know, make the deals, make it all work, make it work in a pricing way that does it. I think Apple's capable of doing an interface that will be a satisfying experience. That's what they do very well. But can they aggregate all the content? Just like any other platform, just, you know, Crackle aggregates certain content and does certain content very well. But Crackle is not the be-all and end-all for all content. Hulu is not the be-all and end-all for content. So what you're asking about is there ultimately going to be one place where you can get everything, whether it's a series, a movie, something on YouTube, or, you know, some online series? And the answer is, I don't think anytime in the near future.
But maybe that's the opportunity. It's sort of like when the internet started out and you had to go to every college to find out what you wanted, then AOL came out, made it easy. So maybe someone in this room comes up with that next great solution where you type in the name of a show and
well, it's still
they give you all that.
You know, content owners, there's still the politics of content ownership.
Of course.
You know, certain companies want to support certain environments that they're part of, and others don't want to. And there's a laundry list all throughout the media world of some companies that say, I'm not going to be part of that. Why? Because my competitor's part of it, and I have to differentiate myself, or I'll be over here. So I don't think there's ever going to be the be-all and end-all of one, but can you get it down to a reasonable number? Perhaps, but that's not what we've been talking about. We're still in the fragmented stage. We're continuing. Everybody wants to build an app. Everybody's saying build a multi-platform app. So I don't see that happening anytime soon, but you get to vote with your usage and your dollars. I don't know.
So jump to the next question, folks. So who wins 2016, cable or telco? With the ability to consume media in a multiple of different ways, what do you folks think?
Whoever owns the transport.
Yeah, I agree.
It's all
with
about
that.
the pipe, right?
It's all about the pipe.
And I don't mean they win the content battle, but I mean they're in a good economic position for their business model if they own the pipe.
Because in the old days, the cable companies would make some money.
And several cable operators today that do distribute content under their own brand have directly or indirectly stated that not distributing content directly would not be a problem for them. Like, you'll see the price of, if your price of your cable bill, your TV cable bill will go down, the pipe for bandwidth will go up, you'll pay the same amount, doesn't really matter.
I think that's an interesting discussion because everyone talks about, the bundling of cable and having to buy all the 500 channels when they watch 4 of them. So when we break it down, if you're watching Hulu and Netflix and you have CBS and you're paying for HBO, then all of a sudden maybe that bill's not going down. You're
Your
watching
20
what you want.
megabit per second needs to go to 30, needs to go to 50, your rates goes up. While your price of content goes down, you need a bigger pipe. So cable wins.
Be careful what you ask for. I mean, I've been a fan of wanting to have unbundled content for many years, and I moderated a panel at CES last year, and J.R. McCabe from Time pointed out that be careful what you ask for because the cost of content to you in an unbundled environment will potentially cost you substantially more than what you're paying today. Once you kind of break it all down, and that's partially because of the inefficiencies in the system. Content gets created in a vacuum. It's not created with an eye to the whole ecosystem. It's created in its own little world, and they go out and try to sell it. So be careful what you ask for on that. I will say the answer to this one, just since I'm the contrarian here on the panel, is I'll say the answer is neither. I don't think either one of them is going to win in 2016 because I think they're both way too slow moving to either one to win.
Yes, sir.
Well, as a former cable operator and one of the founders of the first broadband internet company in the country, At Home Network, I would say that they both will win for the reason that cable has not only the pipe, and we just talked about Comcast, but we also have the content. If you're a cable operator or a telco with no access to content, then your gross margins are very slim to begin with, and your operating expense is very high. It costs a lot of money to roll a truck. The other question is, where's satellite? Because satellite distribution has the most cost-effective, on a cost per bit basis, capability to deliver content to mass audiences. You need the return path, but there are solutions out there that are taking that into consideration. And with curation algorithms and social curation, there's a capability now to pre-position content really close to the user and deliver that content experience in an over-the-top kind of format to the connected devices. So I think you should add satellite to that question. And I think that all three are making moves. DirecTV and AT&T. Verizon's making a really big push to get into the content production business, and they're curating a lot of content to deliver. And the telcos also have as many broadband subscribers as cable does, not just fixed wireline, but also wireless. And a lot of the content is being consumed on wireless devices today. So I think they'll all win, but they're all going to have to change their business models, and we're all going to have to innovate in ways in content production and in distribution to really take advantage of what's going to happen in all three.
I would actually ask the question back to you, to the panel. Are cable operators and telcos, do they want to be dumb pipes or smart pipes?
They want to control that the customer relationship. So
True, but do they want to be dumb pipes or smart pipes? Do they want to own the content and control the content, or do they want to be a commodity and a delivery mechanism? And I think if they can figure out, or somebody can figure out for them what they want to be, because I think it changes to some degree as the wind blows, then you have an answer. But it's not clear to me that they know in the long term which way they want to go, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's challenging.
Operationally, they want to be a dumb pipe because they want their cost per bit to go down. But from a revenue perspective, I think they want to control the content, customer relationship, and block any path of innovation.
Because if you're the dumb pipe, you're
Yeah.
the cheapest
Well,
one
they do.
wins.
They got a great model now. Cable does. You know.
Then you have access to the audience.
And you're sticky.
I think they probably, their decision is based upon how greedy the networks are going to be, you know, essentially. And I think they're all just kind of at this point hoping like hell that HBO and CBS fail miserably to establish a direct relationship with the consumer, so they come tails between legs back to them and say, you know, sorry we ever thought about going alone without you. And I think it's, you know, it's a reasonable thing, like kind of likely to happen, it seems to me, because the networks are too afraid to charge less than cable's charging for HBO, $15 a month. And you know, when you add up 5 or 6 of those just to get what you want, MLB.com, NFL, Game Rewind, you know, HBO, and 2 or 3 others, Netflix and maybe Hulu, you know, you've got a cable bill. So. Programming business too. But you know, they have suppliers who have been grinding them for 20 years now, and you know, that's one reason, and they hope it goes away.
Just next question here. So in 2006, the statement, is the 2006 statement still true in 2015? Analog dollars for digital dimes. And CEO of NBC said that at that time.
Well, that's the point I made about advertising, internet advertising. You know, that's exactly it. It's 10 times fewer ads per hour or half hour, and so it's indeed dimes for dollars at this point.
A few folks there. That's good.
I'm not sure that's true anymore, especially with the younger viewers doing so much on their phones and tablets. I think that the graph that we saw earlier is that the dollars are crossing this year, that there will be more ad dollars on the internet versus TV. So I think we're at a crossroads where the millennials are going to play a huge part in this, the last discussion and this one, because they are cutting the cord, or never cord up. And I'm telling you, that we're right there. I hear huge numbers being thrown out right now about internet entities showcasing of it. I mean, multi-million-dollar deals are being cut. I'll just say Top Gear is $250 million for Top Gear. That was a good day.
I'm not sure I get that point.
Top Gear jumped, and they're going to Prime over the top. They're going OTT themselves. Instead of being on the BBC, they're going to Amazon Prime's new entity, right?
Right.
So they've got this huge budget, and that's no longer on TV. So I mean, that whole entity just went away, and that's the most watched show in my genre of sports television. Top Gear guys owned it for the last quarter of a century. So I think that there's a huge, right this year, lots of stuff's going to go down. Huge multi-million-dollar deals are going to happen.
Well, I think subscription is kind of changing things. You're right. You know, you can't do the ad load you can do on TV, so the ad model's not going to work the way it did on TV on the internet. But you know, there 40 million Netflix, 10 million Hulu, X million Amazon Prime. You know, you've got the majority of homes have a paid subscription to internet video content at this point.
Yeah, but that's digital dimes. I think again, those dimes are a much bigger percentage than 10%. I'm sorry. I'm thinking it's at least 40 right now. And again, because those analytics can so be tracked, they know exactly who they're reaching, where they're reaching, when they reach them, how they reach them. You go to TV, well, we had 60 million viewers last week. We have no idea who they are. but we know which towns they were in.
Well, and nobody has 60 million viewers anymore. That's the main thing. That's the most, well, still, I mean, that's one of the critical things in this competition. You're right. It's very tough right now and the numbers, again, of that crossover number, a tiny piece of that is video advertising. But, you know, TV's got its own problems. And you're right. Theoretically, at some point, you know, Nielsen may get busted, and that would be the end of that.
Old analog digital, old analog worn quarters for shiny digital dimes.
Yes, sir.
We did our first broadcasting in 94, internet,
Hold on, you said 1904?
94. We were not,
Oh, 94. I thought you said 1904. I was very impressed.
anyway, we were one of the early adopters of OTT. We have a cross-platform that reaches 40 countries with local partners. But the question I'm posing, and it's reframing, is about how the shift with all the ad blocking that's taking place cross-platform viewing. So my question is, subscription against curation. What do the panel think the direction is?
Did you guys get that?
not
Subscription versus curation, are you saying?
Yeah, as a monetizing model.
So in other words, someone's curating it and I'm willing to pay them for it, that curation.
So there's a balance. We broadcast shows. So the question now is, our emphasis, is it more for subscription and curated subscription? So I'd like to hear from the panel their thoughts on curation and subscription and marriage.
Well, that's what you're paying for with the subscription. It's what's working on the internet in terms of generating money. There's more subscription money being spent at this point substantially than there is ad money.
But do you see that, those packages, you know, is Netflix really curating, or are they just borrowing money to buy better content? Therefore, this is the content you'll see. Not necessarily saying, oh, here's what I think you're going to watch. You know, if I get a
Well, that's
monopoly because I'm spending a lot of money, more than my competitor is.
Well,
It's
so
sort of
you're
curating.
talking about the original programming.
Right.
Yeah, well, that's kind of a tiny piece of what they do. I mean, it's only 20% of the money they're spending on content is original, and that's just recently. So, you know, all of the billions they've spent on content so far went into a pipeline where they, you know, they're the original collaborative filtering company, or one of them, and you know, that was the appeal, even in their DVD rental days, was that they knew you and they were therefore presenting choices that were likely to appeal to you. And again, that's a service that I think people are willing to pay for, and that's what drives subscription.
But I think, to me, it comes back to both, and we touched on that earlier, where it's like there are some things I absolutely will pay to see without ads. There are things I care much less about, and if I can get it and watch it with ads, great, that's great. So it's again one of those questions where it's both, and it's going to be priorities, and it's going to be different priorities for everybody. The difference is now we have the mechanisms that, you know, can put that up, and even, you know, Hulu has experimented with some of that. I mean, now that I know they have their a higher subscription, so you can just do away with ads altogether. But they were, you know, even though they maybe had not enough ad volume was their biggest problem, but they had some really innovative ways of, hey, you want to watch 1 3-minute ad right now and then see it ad free, or do you just want to watch, you know, the regular normal ad load that you might get? And that's probably the route it's going to be, where there'll be a lot more options for how you monetize against it at some point.
Yeah, I would agree. And you know, I mean, I just from my own personal experience, you know, my kids don't mind. They, you know, they don't have a lot of money. They're glad to watch ads. So, you know, as soon as
Do they pay attention to them?
no, they're hopefully doing their homework during that.
Of course. No, they don't mind. They don't mind watching the content with ads because they're not paying attention to the ads.
Well, exactly.
Something
right.
changed?
Yeah.
That's what the mute button is for.
Yeah, well, and that's what the refrigerator, standing in front of the refrigerator, is all about too.
I'll jump to the next question here. So here's an important point, I think. So who's in control of the app download? You know, will it be Apple, Google, and Amazon in control of Hollywood distribution in the next few years? What do you folks think? Is the world changing and the control changing?
The consumer controls the app download.
Partially.
You either download it or you don't
If
download
it's
it.
available, right? So first the app needs to be allowed to be on the platform, and then you can choose. You can only choose in what's available.
You can sit on the platform all day long. If I don't click the download button, it doesn't really matter. So,
Yeah, so
ultimately, I have the control over whether that app gets downloaded or not. Unless someone gives me an incentive to download it, maybe they pay me to download it. There's a model that no one's really played with. Here, download the app and I'll pay you to do that.
Well, I think it all depends on the genre of content and whether it's short form or long form, premium or other types of content. Right now, YouTube or Google kind of has a monopoly on that type of content. I think everybody else tries but fails to make it a destination. So, but by premium content, there's a reason why they all create their own content, because then they are in control of their own destiny. And I think that will be better to be seen. I think, so those on the second bullet point will probably be the contenders for Hollywood distribution, but for sort of emerging new content formats and new sort of players, I think it's the question how they're going to position themselves vis-a-vis YouTube, and something that was discussed here a lot. Is YouTube a friend or foe? Is it a great distribution mechanism, or does it actually eventually sort of eat your margins and enable to lock you into a particular distribution model? So I think this consumer who controls what to download, they go where the content is. I mean, they're price sensitive, of course, and then they go where the content is, but they're not particularly fussed, given the price model, where they're going to get it from, as long as they can get it.
Andy, this is, I didn't mention you as one of the big bad guys.
I know, I didn't.
Where's the
I know.
Windows App Store? Come on.
They're going to be the ones that make the decision. But it is a delicate dance, really, between the platforms having the right mix of apps that they want for their audience. Because even a given platform, it's going to have a certain niche spin to it. Xbox is obviously something that is younger and gaming oriented, which is why you end up with a lot of anime titles and a lot of others. But then you will have stalwarts. You have the Netflix. Netflix is going to be everywhere because it is so large. So it's something that's specific per platform that you're talking about, and they're gonna bend a certain way, and that's gonna be based on the customers that platform is being adopted by. So you can see it change over time as well. Like, again, everything is new right now. We're kind of all making it up, and then as these things evolve, we all have, a lot more people have iPhones now than, and so it is
But
one of those.
if you're in the music content business, you don't necessarily want to be on an iOS device, right?
Well, you
Unless you want to give them a nice chunk, which, could
right.
be nice.
Again, I guess when you come at it initially, there's always this concern that someone's dipping into your pocket. But if it opens you up to a wider audience, and you've suddenly got a lot more in your pockets, maybe it doesn't matter. So that's that balance. That's finding the ways to use YouTube without having them eat your lunch.
There's an assumption though in this that actually I'm having a little trouble with. I mean, to us, is it Google or Amazon or Apple that controls it?
Or Microsoft.
Or Microsoft. I
Microsoft.
was going to get to that. Predisposes though that the consumer is only using one platform.
Right.
But if you look at what I've got an iPad, an Android tablet, I've got a Windows phone, and I've got a Mac and a Windows laptop.
But you're the head of technology at Sony. Of course you've got all those.
Okay.
No, I got you what you're
All
saying.
right, so let's change it. Let's look at my wife's got.
No, I got you.
She's got a PC, she's got an iPhone, and she's got a Windows phone, right? But that says that there's no particular one place that can control her getting access to the content, because she'll get a Netflix app on whichever app store is appropriate for the platform she wants to watch it on.
Yes, sir. You're a troublemaker here, and I know you're. Jamie's a good guy, one of my heroes.
There's another dimension to this, which is, the cannibalization of the other distribution pipes that the studios have. They're still distributing content to cable operators, to the satellite operators, to the telcos. So, when I was buying time when it's available on Apple, Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. And there's going to be a time when it's available over cable and other distribution mechanisms. So no one's going to control it. Hollywood's still going to control the distribution. And the consumer's still going to control the choice of what platform they want to consume. So,
But Windows are going away. Windows have been going away for the last several years. They're compressing, and they're basically going away. I mean,
I hope you're talking about Windows and not my phone.
no.
Microsoft.
No. You still have a job. It's okay.
No, he's the one.
No,
I got the job.
He's not
No,
the job.
you
I
have
got
the
my-
job. You both have a job. No, distribution windows are going away. They have been for the last several years. As soon as Mark Cuban decided he wanted to start releasing day-and-date movies, you know, and then Disney said, well, maybe we should do something here, and that was just on the theatrical side, let alone what you see and used to be. There used to be a hotel window, there used to be an airline window, there was pay window, there were like 10 different windows, and now there are 3, maybe?
No,
3 or 4?
Well, I would disagree. I mean, they're all still there. You know,
But they're so compressed.
well, they are. I mean, the main one is that the video window is down to 4 months. It was traditionally 6 for 20 years. It was a 6-month window, and it's down to 4, and the theaters didn't die, so the studios got away with that, and it was a good thing for them. And I think, you know, I think content owners should hope that windows go away, because, you know, the consumer, that's part of the frustration the consumer faces right now is you type it into Fancast and you face the window problem, or Fan TV, and you face the window problem, which is that, you know, it's in some window and I can't get it, or it's available here but not there. So, you know, that's not what the consumer wants ultimately. So I think you're right. Windows are going away.
And they're already gone in
ultimately gets
TV,
what they want.
right? Like
Sorry?
TVs, like all the content on TV is available the next day. A lot of content is produced to bypass all the existing channels to go directly OTT. So like, I agree, like Windows are already.
Content is produced outside of the traditional system. That's not to say there, I mean, listen, there's amazing television being produced by the studios, by production companies. We're in this absolute golden age of television, but there's so much content being produced out of the traditional system because it can be put anywhere almost instantaneously, to your point. I mean, literally, you can show up, a TV show can show up the next day in 3 to 5 different places, 10 different places. You don't have to wait. And they don't want to wait to some degree because of the social media engagement. It's like you can't have it both ways. If you want people to engage on Twitter and on Facebook and on Instagram and on Snapchat, and you want to, you know, be doing things on any platform, you need to make it available in as many places as you can at the same time. Otherwise, those social platforms are useless. And you're trying to build social footprints to get people to watch more of this content. So which way do you want to have it? Do you want to have your windows and keep your revenue model, or do you want to have engagement all over the place? Well, I mean, I think we're clearly going towards everywhere at the same time.
Interesting. So Spencer, I want to ask you this. So making movies and delivering movies and television shows now versus like 20 years ago, is it easier or more difficult with the social media being able to promote it, with the technology prices dropping of, you know, DaVinci and cameras and things like that? Just the technology that we have today, is it easier or more difficult than making movies and TV shows 20 years ago?
Looking purely at it from a production point of view, I think you can do more now. But I think there's a tremendous amount of we could do more, therefore we'll do more. It doesn't necessarily make it easier, but it certainly makes the things you used to do easier. But again, as the constraints on those fall away, you find new things you can do, right? So if I'm shooting on film, then how I can shoot is somewhat constrained by, you know, the processing, the lab, doing the dailies, getting check prints and so on and so forth. If I'm shooting digitally, then I can see exactly what I shot. By hitting a play button on the set, that changes the way you go about making television. Does it make it easier? No, it allows you to do more.
Interesting. Another question? So why should a content owner move off of Netflix and YouTube or Amazon and do their own app? I think this is some of the stuff we talked about. So using an established medium out there versus if you create your own content, do your own app. And I think this is some of the branding stuff we talked about. Or should they? Or should they stay on Netflix and YouTube?
well, I think there are a couple of reasons why they should do their own thing, assuming they have enough critical mass. As one is they can control their own destiny, they can control the environment, which is great for the brand. They can also control curation, which is very important for discovery. But they can also create, and I think that's something we haven't really talked about, further enhancement around the product, so they can create things around the show that might be meaningful or important, whether it's sort of a particular and certain genre of content like live sports, etc. You do want to be able to kind of add another layer of engagement on top of that. So you can do that in your own app, but you can't really do that if you're on somebody else's platform. So you're much more limited, mostly just doing playback. So I think you can do all of that. However, I think it's important that you have a critical mass and a strong enough brand to do that. Otherwise, I think you're just not going to get enough traffic.
Interesting. Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody that's starting out is going to go everywhere, and then as they find their audience, they're gonna start curtailing it, and they'll find the uses for these platforms or for these particular distribution channels that are most effective for them, and they'll use that. Maybe it means that they're going to have their own app someday, but maybe it's a critical mass issue. I think there's the YouTube creators announced what they were making last week, and I bet they're pretty happy being in a fairly siloed platform. But there's a lot of people under them that are probably looking to have exposure elsewhere to offset the fact that they're not in that top 100 list.
And that's not any different from retail. Like if you're Nike, do you build a Nike store in Beverly Hills or do you sell in Walmart, right? And like to the point of it was raised, it depends. Like, have you achieved the level of your brand is sustainable in its own, and can you expand to multiple distribution channels? Each of them have their own benefits, right? You have volume on one side, you have community building on another. You may have better margin management on others. But you need to reach a certain scale, potentially, to do that.
I wanted to, reaching the end here, so when I open up for questions, you had a specific question?
Yeah, I have a quick question going back to Steve's point of this being the golden age of television with all this content and then utilizing social media. Do you think we have reached an age that is a little bit too golden, a little oversaturated with television? Are we facing a problem that Spencer was facing in front of the fridge, too much stuff, and which one do I choose right now? And does that hurt social media involvement, because we don't have shows that everybody now as a country we can be engaged in, except for sports maybe. Everybody that I know watches different stuff on different platforms at different times. So are we going to see a decrease in the number of shows being made, or do you foresee that a problem for 2017, 18, whatever?
How much time do you have?
-1.
Yeah, exactly. So we can do this in about a minute. There's no such thing as too much content in the first place. There's a challenge with expectations around content. If you look at what like Nielsen numbers look like 20 years ago or 10 years ago versus what they look like today, it's sad in terms of what constitutes a hit. But a hit isn't necessarily defined by a Nielsen number anymore. It's defined a number of different ways. It could be defined by social engagement. It could be defined by views, if you're on YouTube, for example. I mean, PewDiePie has like this unbelievable amount of eyeballs. And, he's doing his thing. And it's his, call it content. If it's content, call it, whatever it is. But the guy's raking in the dollars huge. So, good for him. I'm proud of him. Good for him. Ultimately, it's how much people are willing to consume. And, it's kind of a tired expression when cream rises to the top. The good shows people will watch, the ones that people want to talk about. The model that we're under, the last thing I'll say is the model we're under of content creation, especially around traditional media, it doesn't work. It's not sustainable. You can't spend that kind of money for the kinds of volume of eyeballs you're getting in a macro way, but you can still do it in a micro way. There are still going to be good shows that are produced, you know, Mad Men. There's going to be a Mad Men that comes along and produced with high production values, and it's going to look great, and Game of Thrones and others like that. But ultimately, a lot of them aren't going to make money. And just like anything else, there'll be a kind of culling out period, and there'll ultimately be less than there is today, but still an enormous amount. It's about a third of an answer, but sorry.
All right, thank you very much. And again, thank you for all our panelists, Spencer Stevens, Andy Beach, Christoph, Vivian, Tom, and Steve Bradbury. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming out.
That was it.
Thanks so much.